Okay, thank you. Thank you, Christine. So thank you all for being with us today. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the Diabetes Foundation's discussion, Voices of Diabetes. And today's discussion was made possible thanks to Camp Nejeda. We can't thank the camp enough for its partnership and support of our mission. My name is Janine Salente, and I'm the Executive Director for the Diabetes Foundation. And as you know, the foundation serves thousands of individuals each year. We provide focused support and try and help people get the care they need in the community to help them manage their diabetes. So we know that diabetes is hard, and it's our goal to provide unique programs and services that offer access to care and also connections for support. So you are all in a treat today because Alice, Kirsten, and Max are amazing, and they are our voices of diabetes, and you're going to completely find them to be candid and offer a truly realistic perspective on their journey. I know you'll be inspired after the hour is up, and we are grateful for all of you for joining us today to share your experiences about living with T1D and balancing school and life and relationships and everything that goes along with it. So for our guests out there, please know that today's discussion will be 1 hour. Alice, Kirsten, and Max will be speaking about different topics throughout the hour, and today's discussion is interactive. So even though you're muted, we want you to be able to ask questions. So please make comments by going to the bottom of your screen and putting them in the Q&A, and we will definitely pick them up and answer you throughout the next hour. We definitely want to hear what you're thinking and answer those questions that you really want to know. And it is now my great pleasure to introduce our panelists. So our first panelist is Alice. Alice has been living with type 1 diabetes since she was 2 years old. And as a preteen, she recalls trying to fit in with all the other kids and started to ignore her diabetes. Fast forward to now, she is happy to report that her latest A1C test was a 6.9, and she is a freshman in college and strives to live her best life possible. She attributes her success in her journey, in her diabetes journey, to her family, her healthcare team, and I'm so excited to the Diabetes Foundation as well. Thank you, Alice. It is our pleasure to work with you.
Thank you.
Kirsten was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at the age of 2. She has been active in sports, including soccer, field hockey, and competitive dance, and involved with Camp Nejeda for the past 6 years, and is currently a freshman at Quinnipiac University, studying in the 6-year accelerated program to earn her doctorate in physical therapy. She hopes to open her own practice one day. Total entrepreneur and go-getter. You are amazing. Max was diagnosed with T1D when he was 5 years old. He has also been involved with Camp Nejeda for a number of years, was a counselor there, is still a counselor there perhaps, or just stopped. He likes to keep himself active by running in his neighborhood, playing tennis, and he recently decided to change career paths, leaving medical school to pursue a master's degree in science education instead. And his goal is to earn a PhD in academic administration and educational leadership in the future. And we are hoping to hear a lot about that today because it sounds like such a great track. So a big welcome to all of you. Thank you all so much for being here. And I'm just going to kick us off by asking you a question. You were also young when you were diagnosed, between 2 and 5 years old. Can you just talk a little bit about when you sort of knew in your head that you had T1D and how you felt about it? I'd love to begin with Kirsten, if you can start by answering that question.
Hi, everyone. I just want to, again, thank the Diabetes Foundation for having us. This is so exciting. Well, I got diagnosed when I was 2 years old. My parents have a whole story about it, how we went out for Easter dinner and I was so thirsty that I was reaching over to the other table to grab a random stranger's water. And then we went to the bathroom, of course, because when your blood sugar's high, have to pee a lot. I was sticking my head under the faucet to drink water. So that's when we kind of figured out, okay, this might be a medical issue. And we went to the hospital and the rest is history. But I was definitely involved with competitive dance for a very long time. I did that for 6 years between the ages of, I believe, 7 and 13. I That's when I really started taking care of my diabetes by myself. That it was definitely a huge adjustment because within that time period, I was also adjusting from doing shots, like manual daily injections, to the pump. So I think once I did that and having that new technology, that's when I started realizing that this was definitely different and it was something to take on. But luckily, I had a lot of support in my life. I went to Morristown Memorial Hospital. I had the support of all the doctors there. And I actually have, she's basically like my older sister now, this girl named Catherine, who I got paired up with. She also has type 1 diabetes, and she babysat me for years. And so she was kind of like my role model. And just learned so much from her. So I think as much as diabetes is difficult, I had a really good support system, and I wasn't really too scared of anything. It's just something that I knew other people were taking on in my life. So, yeah.
Alice, Max, do you want to add to that at all?
Well, I remember when I was diagnosed when I was 2. The way how I was diagnosed, I had 12 seizures the year before I was diagnosed, and every seizure, my doctor just said to my mom, like, oh, she just, she's under a lot of stress and stuff, which didn't add up because I was only 1 years old. So I don't know what I was so stressed about. And then when I was 2, I was sent to the hospital, and that's when I was diagnosed. And I remember when I was 6 years old, I came home from school and I was telling my sister that I felt really shaky and like super weak. And my sister noticed that like I wasn't doing okay. And then that's when I kind of realized like there's something going on with me. And then after that, that's when I realized like I had a pump next to me, and I couldn't eat everything that like all my other friends used to eat. But my mom and my sister really helped me with that.
That's super interesting because, for me, I got it when I was 5, and so I do kind of remember ever so slightly a little bit what it was actually like being diagnosed and actually getting diabetes. I mean, I know that at first I was misdiagnosed. My mom took me to the doctor because I was drinking way too much, and every night I'd wake up and she said that I would like sprint to the bathroom in the middle of the night, like 4 or 5 times every night. Like, I couldn't stop going to the bathroom. And I don't remember what they misdiagnosed it as at first, but I remember when she took me to another doctor and they diagnosed it as diabetes, I was in the hospital. I think I was there for a week. And I just remember not really knowing what was going on, but knowing that like this kind of sucked now. I remember hating like the finger pricks and getting shots and stuff like that. And I remember being in the hospital and almost being conditioned by like the nurses and the doctors where like when a doctor would come in, I'd be happy because the doctors were always super nice and they would just talk to me and like there was no problem. And I hated when the nurses would come in because they were the ones that were giving the shots or pricking my finger or doing something mean. So I'd always like hear the door open and wait to see like who was coming around the corner, and I start crying if it was a nurse. um, but I do remember looking like retrospectively on when I was first diagnosed. I only realized this a couple of years ago. Right before I was diagnosed, I was taking skiing lessons because I was diagnosed in February, and I remember I was standing with like a whole bunch of other kids waiting to get on the ski lift, and all of a sudden feeling, I mean, now I call it feeling low, but I was feeling dizzy and like the world was spinning, and I started sweating and I got super anxious and nervous. Like I just started going crazy. I didn't know what was going on. It was just the worst memory ever. I like ran away. I ran to my mom. I started crying and screaming that I was hungry and needed food, and she didn't know what was going on, and I didn't know what was going on. It didn't make any sense to me. And I realize now looking back that must have been the first time my blood sugar went low, and I just, yeah, we had no idea what that meant.
That's super scary. Wow, it's amazing and like one of your critical moments in life because you so clearly remember it.
Yeah. I didn't want to ski for years after that. I like was horrified of skiing.
I can imagine. I'm horrified of skiing regardless, so going down those mountains. Okay, so but all of you are sort of around the same age, around like 5 to 7, when you sort of realize that like you had diabetes and finger pricks and a little different from other people. So that weren't doing the same thing and maybe can eat differently. So how did your family unit, like what were the things that you did to, and your family did to sort of help you care for your diabetes and deal with it at that point?
So I don't know about you guys, but when I was little, we had these Calorie King books that we would carry around. Yes. And it had the carb count for like everything on it. And so my mom had that in her purse at all times. And now all you have to do is just look something up on your phone. So that's nice.
Yeah.
But we would go around with these books. I had one at school too. It was a whole team effort. I remember even from kindergarten, I was very lucky. From kindergarten to 8th grade, I had the same school nurse pretty much the entire time, besides like 1 or 2 years. So she's like another grandmother to me now. I love her so much. But it took a village for my parents, for my school nurse, for my grandparents. I mean, we had a logbook pretty much everywhere to just make sure everybody was on the same page, that they knew what I had eaten before. So it was more of everybody just communicating and seeing kind of like where I was throughout the day. I think that communication was really huge for everybody.
Yeah, we also had the calorie book, and I remember my mom like would always take it out. She's like, "Hold on, wait, I need to see how much first." But no, my mom and my sister, they really made me feel comfortable. Like I did it like every time I had something going on with me, they would take care of me, and like they also had a really good communication with each other. Um and then when I like finally started doing everything on my own, that's when I was like, okay, I don't need to have a book, but I can get the calorie app and I can search from there what I have to do. So it really was a communication thing that helped us.
Yeah. I remember my family specifically, one of the things, at least when I was first diagnosed, is they were very wary of having high fat foods, high sugar foods, because they'd make my blood sugars crazy. And, my parents, they would get scared of, me being high ever and like all this kind of stuff because they hear horror stories and the doctor tells them to be worried about it. And I remember specifically it was horrible when I'd go to birthday parties, like for other kids, because they'd have pizza and they'd have cake and all this other stuff. And my parents didn't want me eating it. They said that I couldn't eat it. Like I just couldn't have it. And I remember they would just bring me like a sandwich to eat instead of pizza. And that sucked because I wanted pizza. And they'd bring like their own cupcakes that they would make. And they'd make like cupcakes. And then instead of icing, they'd put whipped cream on the top. And that would be like my cake that I would have instead. And that only lasted for a little while they were like super nervous about everything and didn't really understand how everything worked yet. But I remember that was one of the things that they tried. But for the most part, my parents always just kind of made it my problem. Like they would say, like they'd put it on me to be responsible about it, even from a young age. So they would always support me and they would always help me and do everything that they needed to do. But even when I was a kid, I would go eat and they would say, "Oh, did you check your blood sugar yet?" And if I said no, they'd say, "Well, why not? You should, go check your blood sugar." They would just kind of always check up on me and make sure I was doing it. So it was always like my responsibility from a young age. And I think that kind of helped as I got older, just get used to that it was my problem to deal with and that they'd always be there to help, but that, I had to kind of take ownership of it.
By a scale, I said that wrong probably, but do you find eating harder or going to the doctor or the finger pricks, like in priority, is the hardest thing when you were a kid? Was it the eating piece?
I think as a kid, yeah, the eating.
Yeah.
Because I do have to agree, at those birthday parties, I mean, my mom would have to come to every single one and she would have to give me a shot every single time. And that was a whole other reason why we were like, okay, we should get the pump now. And I mean, technology has just advanced so much, but the eating was tough. But then as I guess I can go into this later, but the teenage years, going to the endocrinologist was the worst. because that was stressful.
Yeah, birthday parties, my mom was always at them. She always had to make sure I was like taking care of myself, kind of like you, Max. She made sure that I was doing my part, but she would always like check up on me to make sure. But I would always hate going to birthday parties because I'd have to bring my mom, and I'm like, "Hi guys, this is my mom." So yeah.
Now all the moms go to birthday parties. So
Yeah, now it's a party for the parents as much as it is for kids.
yeah. So then moving on to your teenage years. So it sounds, Kirsten, like things changed a little. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think okay, because the teenage years, you just grow so much just in general, and then you have to grow within your diabetes and your responsibility. I mean, I do have to say that no matter what, I did have to grow up fast because of diabetes, but I don't regret it or anything. I really appreciate that. I think that's such a valuable thing to just try to be on top of yourself as much as you possibly can. But it was definitely a big transition. I mean, pretty much the same thing as you guys said, that I mean, my parents, they were really, really on top of me in the beginning, but then once 5, 6, 7 years into diabetes, I all of a sudden took it upon myself. I became very independent with that. I think what really changed the game for me in my teenage years and in high school was getting a CGM, because I had never like known what specific foods did to my body. I just didn't know how my body would react, even though I had had diabetes for so long. Because I had the Medtronic one at first, so that one does not connect to your phone, so my parents weren't able to see that. But even for me, I remember when I first got it, I would study that thing. I was like, okay, so I ate this then and this then, and I was just fascinated by it. But I think that increased awareness of my own blood sugar really, really helped. Because I was still going to the nurse, I think, through my freshman year in high school. And then I think I started emailing her my logbook information by sophomore year, and then by junior and senior year, I was fine. But it was a big learning curve in those years. There's a lot that happened, and not only with my life and diabetes, but the technology, and then like high school itself is crazy. So yeah, teenage years were definitely a learning curve.
Teenage years were rough. I mean, I don't know if either of you guys ever went through like a burnout phase with your diabetes, but I definitely did in high school for a little while. And that was basically, I just was sick of doing it and sick of having it and sick of being different and not being able to be like everyone else. And so I just kind of stopped caring about it. I stopped checking my blood sugar. I stopped really calculating what I was eating. I would give myself a little bit of insulin and just kind of figure it out. And so I felt crappy for a while doing that. And eventually I kind of snapped out of it and got over it. I was lucky that I did, but it was rough for a really long time. I mean, the hormones and puberty was the worst thing in the world. Going through the teenage years, trying to manage that. I couldn't find a basal rate that would work for me. I changed every other week. I couldn't find ratios that would work. There was just so many crazy things going on. Even just like personally and psychologically too. Like I think that in the teenage years, at least for me, that's when I really started to realize how different diabetes made me. I think as a younger kid, I more thought like, okay, this is just what I'm dealing with, and like, it's fine, it's okay, it doesn't matter. And when I became a teenager, I started to realize how much other people didn't have to deal with that I always did, and how much it really set me apart in so many different ways.
Yeah, for me, I think when I got to high school, that's when I realized that I was the only one in my school that had diabetes. So it was like really rough for me. But once I got the sensor, that's when I finally started to like take care of myself better. And I remember my doctor told me, if you want to go to college out of state, if you want to get your driver's license, you need to start taking care of yourself now. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to. And that kind of like was a wake up call for me, because it made me realize like, wow, this is like a real thing that I'm going to have for the rest of my life. I should act on it. And the sensor really helped me. And then once I got the Tandem T Slim, and that was like perfect for me because I was able to see my pump, my sensor on my pump, and it wasn't like as bad as it was before. So it really helped me.
So Max, how old were you when you sort of started to care again and take care of yourself again?
I think, let me see, freshman year. So I probably started to burn out when I was around 15. I think somewhere around sophomore year, and it didn't last very long. I think it lasted maybe half of that year, maybe 6 months. And it kind of got to the point where I realized that there was nothing I could do about it. I was not really feeling sorry for myself, but it was just kind of like, I can either do this or I can die. Like I can, basically, you're killing yourself. You're not taking care of it, and you have all these risks of, everyone knows the risks of what can happen if you don't take care of it. Yeah, I just kind of realized that it wasn't worth me feeling sorry about it, and that, being like normal, or however you would describe it, that this just was my normal, and that if I can deal with it. It's not like I can't. I just didn't want to anymore.
Can I add on to that too?
Yeah.
I also was burnt out really bad during my junior year, because not only is junior year known as hell year, but I was so absorbed in school and trying to perform well in school that I just completely put diabetes on the back burner, and I got super burnt out. I remember, I think January of junior year, I was like, I have to change something, because I was so anxious about it. But it's just kind of that vicious cycle of like, it's kind, because your A1C is kind of like a grade on your life. That's like kind of how I see it, and like how well you're doing with your diabetes. And as much as I was performing great in school, my A1C was terrible. Oh, speaking of, sorry. A little high. Anyway, I got super burnt out, and I think by the time I really figured out that I needed to change something, I do remember I was getting annoyed with how often my pump alarms were going off. And that cycle was terrible, because of course you want to do better, but your pump is trying to help you do better. It was interesting. So I actually went on shots for like 2 weeks just to like reset, go back to the basics. And that actually helped me a lot, because it helped me appreciate my pump a lot more, instead of having to like pull out my insulin pen in the middle of the cafeteria and having to give myself a shot. So yeah, that was different. That was hard to get through, because it was like that for a couple of months, because I think it was actually after I got home from Camp Nejeda for that summer. That summer was such a great summer, but it was difficult not to be around those people and like my community of type 1 diabetics. And that just, it started the lull. But we got out of that, and I know that burnout is still going to happen in my life at one point, but just got to take it day by day.
I think too, part of the burnout for me in high school was also very like kind of self-conscious and like personal in a way. Like I know that I started to get annoyed, like when I'd go swimming, or when I go to a pool, or when I'd have my shirt off and like if I had a set on or whatever, like I would always see people staring at like, what is that on your body? Like, what is that? It's weird. And like I get that, and I was never really annoyed by it, because like I get that it's different, I get that it was weird, but it was just something that kind of built up to this like massive insecurity of mine. Like this is a weird thing. It is different. Like, it kind of made me realize like that, okay, this is strange. Like to someone who doesn't have diabetes, seeing that like it is kind of a weird thing. Like it's, it's different. It's kind of scary. You say that you have, a needle or a catheter in you, like people get kind of freaked out by that. And I know that at least for me, is kind of weird. I don't know if you guys have ever had this, but I've talked to other people about this, and this was kind of a thing. I know that like when you're a teenager in high school, right? And you start thinking about dating people, and you start thinking about like possibly being intimate with people or being physical or whatever. One of the biggest like things that was driving me crazy in my head was like, okay, if I'm with someone and like I take my shirt off, is this going to be weird? Like, are they going to freak out? Are they going to like think that it's super crazy? Is it going to kill the mood or whatever? I was thinking at, when I was 14, 14, 15, 16 years old. I was like, is this going to be weird? Like, if I'm doing something, should I take my pump off? Should I leave it on? When should I take it off? Is that going to be strange? Like, are they going to be okay with that? It was like such an awful, like self-conscious problem for me as a teenager, as I was like coming into who I was. And like, that just added such a massive part to it. I think that was a huge part of my burnout too, because I was like, I don't want to deal with this right now.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I had the
Yeah,
exact same thing. And I also, part of it was seeing what the pump sites were doing to my body, and like having all this scar tissue. Like there's sites on my body where I can't put pump sites anymore because I have so much built up scar tissue after putting, pump sites in for 12 years and doing shock even before that. So now that you say that was definitely really hard for me at one point, was like standing there in front of the mirror and having to do something I did every 3 days for the past however many years, but like staring in the mirror and being like, all right, got to put this on my body again. And that having to do that over and over and over again got really annoying.
Yeah. I ended up finding out, I think it was 3 years ago, that I'm actually allergic to Humalog. So I had like a dent in between my leg and the back of my like my back, and we were so confused why, and it was because I'm allergic to Humalog. So I had a bump, and I was so insecure whenever I would like wear shorts or like go to the beach with my friends, and I'm like, oh yeah, like, oh, it happened because I'm allergic to insulin. It's like, but you're diabetic, and I'm like, there's different types of insulin. So that was a lot too.
What's the craziest question anyone's ever asked you?
Me?
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't that crazy, but people always ask me if like I have a beeper. And I'm like, no, I don't.
Or like a pager.
Yeah,
Yeah.
pager. But no one really asked about my like the gap I had. It was more just me looking at it and afraid if people would look at it, but no one really minded it.
For like an actual question, I think I don't get that many crazy questions. Most of the time it's just like, can you eat sugar? Like, can you eat food? Like all that kind of stuff. I don't think I get a whole lot of crazy questions. I actually got someone that asked me once if I had cancer because they saw the site and they just assumed it was like a cancer report kind of thing. But most of the time it's not questions. I did have once in high school though. I was in a class, I think it was 10th grade, and I was looking at my pump or something. It was after lunch. I think I was bolusing or I was typing buttons or whatever. And one of my friends who knows that I was diabetic and was just like messing around with me kind of said like, oh, like, Max, put your Game Boy away. Like it just as like a joke. And everybody in my class knew that I had diabetes. It was like, I never hid it. It wasn't a secret. Everyone was cool with it. And they were just like, poking fun, messing around. And the teacher heard and was convinced that I had a Game Boy in my hand, and I was like, it's not, like, it's a pump, like I promised. And he's like, just put it away, I don't want to hear it, just put it away, it's not a problem. I was trying to explain to him like what I was doing, and he wouldn't listen, and he came over and took my pump and like walked away with it and ripped my side out.
Oh,
And I swear he
Heard
almost
those stories before, but not like
yeah, when he was fully white, he like freaked out. I mean, he probably thought he just killed me or something, like ripped something. He had no idea what he just did. And he was so concerned. I was basically like, can I go to the nurse now? Like, is that right? And he like
oh my
wrote me a
gosh.
letter to apologize. Like he was so scared that I was going to get him fired or something. Like, I don't know what he was worried about. I mean, it was annoying, but wasn't that mad about it. But that's probably the craziest thing I've had happen.
I kind of have a similar story. Not that my teacher ripped out my pump site, but when I was in 4th grade, I remember this because it was huge. It was so dramatic for like 4th graders. But I had my pump out like laying on the chair because it just like got annoying that it was like hooked to my pants. I don't know. So I like put it out on the chair, and my friend saw it, and they all used to mess around with me the same way, and they were like, oh, you got games on that. And so, but he took my pump and started pressing buttons and gave me insulin. and we had a sub that day. And that was it. I was like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm gonna do, because I mean, luckily it wasn't that much at all, but it was still terrible. And my friends were like, "You're gonna kill her!" That was a whole experience. But luckily everybody apologized. It was fine. But yeah,
I remember when I was in pre-K, and we had show and tell, I decided to show off my pump. So I was like, "This is my pump." And then my friend was like, "Oh, can I press the button?" And I was like, "No." And then she did. She like pressed the button, and I think it was just like the backspace. It wasn't anything crazy, but I was freaking out. I was like, "I gotta go to the nurse." And then she was like, "It's okay. You like nothing happened." Yeah.
that's funny.
Do you all feel, do you ever feel like you're always explaining or educating people? Is that like a big,
Yeah.
yeah.
Especially when I got to college, everyone here knows that I have diabetes, knows what it is, how to take care of myself. But when I got there, I had to explain all over again. And I had to tell them, like, listen, I can take care of myself. I just want to like let you know, if my blood sugar goes low, and I don't have the energy to get juice, can you get it for me? Like, I just had to explain to them all over again.
Yeah, I definitely the same thing. I like educating people on it though, because
Mhm.
I mean, you do get asked those stupid questions like, can you eat that? Or like, how does this affect this? Or how does it, I mean, I think what comes out of it though is like your true friends are the ones who are actually really curious about it and want to help you. And I
Mhm.
think having those conversations are great. I mean, sometimes it's annoying though, because I grew up pretty much with the same kids all my life and they all knew about my diabetes and like they were so good with it growing up. But now I'm finding that I'm explaining myself a lot, but it's okay. I mean, I would rather people know what I'm actually going through than them just guessing and then making like just not understanding it, you know?
Mhm.
So.
So Alice was talking about her time in talking to people in school. Alice, you're the only one. I don't know what your major is. What did you decide to? What are you majoring in?
I'm majoring in nursing.
Oh, oh, that's
Yeah.
cool. So you're all in the healthcare field.
Yeah.
Well, Max,
Kind of.
kind of, right? What is what's science education exactly?
What is science education?
Yes.
So for me, I want to do probably chemistry or biology teacher in high school for a little while, and then make the jump to administration. So being a principal or a superintendent in a district somewhere.
That is very cool. So did you guys in any way feel like diabetes led you to, well, I guess I have two questions. This first one is like, did diabetes lead you to the fields, your chosen fields in college or your track that you want to pursue in life?
For me, yes, because I feel like because I was explaining myself so many times, it kind of made me realize like it didn't bother me, and I actually like learning more about it. Um, and nursing is definitely something that I can work in the health field, but I can work anywhere. You know, I can be a psych nurse, I can work in pediatrics, I can work wherever I want, and that really got my attention. So definitely for me.
That's cool.
Yeah, pretty much same thing for me too. I mean, so I grew up again dancing and I loved dancing. But for high school, I actually went to Morris County Votech, which is high school with like a lot of different academies. And so I found myself, so my dad owns a gym and my mom was a dancer. So I kind of grew up with like a love and appreciation for both of those. So I found myself deciding, even like before college, would I rather go to the sports medicine academy or to the dance academy? But then I kind of realized, oh, if I go to the sports medicine academy, I can learn the science behind dance, and that's really cool to me. So there was the whole thing with diabetes too, that I was like, ah, me, because I've always had this little thing in the back of my mind saying, go be an endocrinologist, like you'd be fine, you could do that. Just because it's such a big part of my life. So I think all of those things culminating together, like going into physical therapy is a great way for me to like put what I've learned in my life, because I don't know about you guys, but in all of my health science classes, I like take what I learn and apply it to my diabetes. Yeah, and like see what I can like see how it just makes sense of it, you know? That's definitely like a huge part of my learning curve, and it just helps me appreciate what I want to do more. So yeah, definitely.
That's great.
Yeah, for me too. I mean, I've always done a lot of work with different foundations. I've worked with the JDRF a whole lot in the past, and I always have been teaching people about diabetes and educating people and talking to people, and I always really liked doing that, and I always really enjoyed it. And that's was a huge kind of factor in me wanting to become a doctor and wanting to go to medical school. Um, so that kind of pushed me in that direction. And then when I was in medical school and was going through it after the first year, I kind of realized that it wasn't the teaching about diabetes part that I actually really enjoyed about it. It was just the teaching in general. And that I wasn't as interested in the medical side as I thought I was. I just wanted to do something with teaching, something with, kids, educate, that kind of thing. And so it kind of shifted me from there.
That's really cool. But so teaching chemistry is going to be very interesting. All those, and it's what a great field to be able to sort of shape all those minds. And the thing that I wonder is like going from high school to college to where you are now, choosing your career inspiration, which is amazing. Um, Having another transition in life, Max, now you've left, medical field and you're doing this and you guys are on your tracks. Did you find, and then add COVID-19 onto the whole thing, do you find that this transition period over the last, few months or has this been challenging? Has it impacted your diabetes, or how is that? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I mean, transitions in general for me working with diabetes has always been really crazy. Um, I've kind of been all over the place. When I was in college, I was on the tennis team there for 4 years, and so I thought I was pretty active being doing that and being in college. And then when I left college, I went and worked for a year in a doctor's office before going to medical school. And the transition to there was really astonishing for me because I had to change all my basal rates for probably months that I was trying to reel them in because I was low all the time. And I had no idea why. And I realized that it was because now that I was working, I was up, standing, walking around all day long. Whereas in college, even though I was playing a sport, a lot of my day I was sitting down and I was studying or in class or doing something else. And I found that with every transition that I've made, even going from working, going to then starting medical school, I was high a lot because my basals weren't nearly high enough because that wasn't medical school wasn't nearly as physically demanding as working a job. So I think the biggest thing for me with transitions has been basal rates and carb ratios and that kind of stuff and having to change them all the time. So, and that takes a while for me because I'm always afraid to do like a big change all at once. So I do it very slowly, little by little. So for the first month or two after I do something new, usually is kind of rough for me. But with COVID and all this stuff, and I obviously moved out here during this whole COVID era and everything. I wouldn't actually say that coronavirus has impacted my diabetes like personally, at least for me. It's impacted my life in 1,000 different ways. I mean, I wear masks, I do everything that everybody else is doing. But in terms of my diabetes, it doesn't really change what I'm doing day to day for my care. I definitely having diabetes makes me a little more worried about it for sure, and makes me probably a little more cautious than some other people. But yeah, I don't think that it's changed what I do for a day-to-day basis. I don't know if you guys are any different.
Yeah, I don't think I've made any specific changes due to COVID. to hit on the transitions part, I think this past year for me has been kind of crazy. There have been a lot of different transitions that I've gone through, whether it be from going to school every day to staying home and just being super anxious and stressed about the unknown. I mean, even if I'm having an off day and my blood sugar is like super, super high, that gets me nervous because I don't know about you guys, but I get very insulin resistant when I'm sick. So I think the only thing is that it's like a heightened awareness if my blood sugar, if I'm becoming insulin resistant, I would be like, oh no, I'm getting COVID, but I didn't. I do agree with the basal rates. Right before I went to college, I switched to the Dexcom from the Medtronic sensors. So I had the whole auto mode system, but then I just transferred to going back to like a regular pump and then just getting my CGM readings. But because of that, my basal rates were not at all where they should have been, and I was going low all the time. But then at nighttime, when I was stressed out about like getting homework in, my blood sugars would rise. So balancing that was definitely difficult, and I had to like work alongside my doctors to like figure all of that out. But yeah, I think for me, stress really influences my blood sugars. I do get stressed out kind of often, but it's just a whole other life thing that you have to people just don't understand that stress does play a big role in how, like, I mean, your body goes into fight or flight when you're stressed, so your blood sugar just goes up. But I think that's one big thing that a lot of people don't understand, that I'd like to like raise awareness about as well.
Yeah, for COVID, nothing really changed for me, but I do get a lot more stress now. So I do notice sometimes when I'm having like a really stressful day, my blood sugar goes up. So I have to like calm myself down, take care of myself. But I think what I noticed about me when I went to college was that I started being more productive, which is kind of weird because I should have been more productive like back home, but I was always walking because I don't have a car the first year. So I was always walking to campus. I actually enjoy working out now. Before it was like a chore I had to do, but now I like going to the gym, and that really like regulates my blood sugar a lot. So I guess it helped like in a good way for me.
So you help, so your way of alleviating stress is working out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, Kirsten,
And
oh, sorry, please go
no,
ahead.
I'm sorry. I was gonna say my campus like is super hilly. So even if I don't go to the gym, I could just walk across campus and that's my workout.
That's awesome.
Hmm.
How about you, Kirsten?
I have to say the same. I'm actually a certified personal trainer. I got that through the academy at my school, so that's really fun. So I love working out. I love all that stuff. How else do I handle my stress? I mean, sometimes it's hard when you're a college student. You like because as much as I say that I'm stressed out, like even if I just push through my assignments, that just releases all of my stress in some weird way. I don't know. I think just so actually, I think this is just an exercise for myself. I'm like a list writer. I write down everything that I have to do, and every single time, even the smallest things, like doing a site change. Even if I write that down and cross it out, that kind of shows me visually that I'm getting through my day. Yeah, I don't know, and of course, just hanging out with friends. That just releases a ton of stress too.
So we have writing lists. I write lists too. It's a little scary. And exercise, which I should do more of. Max, how about you?
So for me, normally my best way to kind of deal with my stress is I'll go and hang out with a friend. I'll just see if anyone's free to go do anything. I mean, just go take a walk with me, go grocery shopping, go get, just go do anything, go get out, go interact with someone else, and it'll just take my mind off of anything else that's going on because now I have something else to focus on. It's obviously a lot harder to do right now because you're not really seeing people as much and people aren't going out and doing things. So for me, I think the biggest thing that I do is if I'm getting really stressed out about something or I'm feeling overwhelmed with how many things I have to do and all that kind of stuff, I'll just kind of give myself a time that I'm going to stop doing all those things. And to me, I treat it almost as like, a class period in college where, this class is over at whatever time it's over. And then that's it. There's no more of that class. I can leave and go do something else. And I kind of try to do that in my life when I'm getting overwhelmed and stressed. I'll say, okay, I'm going to give myself another 2 hours or another whatever it is until 7 o'clock tonight. And then I'm giving myself the rest of the night off. And I'm not going to think about anything. I'm not going to do anything. It's just that's the time that it ends. And whatever I get done, I get done. And if it's not done, I'll worry about it tomorrow. And it's kind of tricky to force yourself into that kind of mentality, but that's probably the best thing that I do.
So do you guys have like a go-to person? Like, who do you call? Is there someone you call, or do you just go for a run?
Oh, I definitely call the girl that I was talking about before, Catherine, who also has diabetes, and she's basically like my role model. She's pretty much like my older sister. She grew up with me. So just anything that I'm stressed out about, like there's nobody else who understands me better. So I always call her. Yeah. And my mom. Love my mom.
Yeah, I usually call my mom, but my sister, she went through nursing school. So whenever I'm dealing with like work, school related stuff, I'm always like calling her and like ranting to her about it. But the both of them really helped me through it all.
I usually call anyone from camp, to be honest, anyone that I've met from camp, just because they're always great people to talk to and vent to, and they get what you're going through on the kind of another level. Because talking to someone else who has diabetes and having that connection, there's something there that's very special about it that I find super helpful.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit more about camp, because it is a really special place. Everybody there goes through the same thing you go through. And from what I see, like, you learn how to be self-sufficient, you learn how to recognize your own body, and you're taught to sort of advocate for yourself. Did you learn a lot of those tools at camp?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest thing that camp did for me was it gave me kind of a support group and a community of people who all knew what I was going through. I grew up, and I was lucky enough that I wasn't someone who didn't know any diabetics growing up. I knew a couple, I knew of them, but I was never super friendly with them. I just kind of knew that they were there, and it wasn't a big deal. But going to camp, the biggest thing that it does for me and for a lot of people is that you get to be surrounded by people who know what you're going through and who know how you're feeling. And you don't realize that you're missing that until you have it. The ability to say that your blood sugar is low, or that your blood sugar is high, and have that not just be words to someone, but have that be like a feeling and an emotion and like all these things. They know how you're feeling and what you're thinking and what you're doing. I think that for me, that's the best part about it.
Yeah, I would definitely have to agree with that. I mean, I grew up, I had Catherine, but she was the only person I knew. And there was one other girl in my school, and she was 2 grades above me, and I just didn't really know her at all. And before I went to camp, I was honestly a little nervous because I didn't actually start going to camp until I was 13, because I had been competitive dancing for years, and every summer I would be training for nationals and going to nationals, and it would just run into camp. So I was honestly a little nervous that first year that I wasn't competing about going to a place with so many diabetics. Like, I was a little nervous because I was like, what if I'm overwhelmed by it? I don't know. But I still remember that first session. I think it was 2 days before we were going home. And I remember sitting there doing like a stupid activity. I think we were doing Mr. Nejeda. So it was like a pageant for the guy counselors.
Wait, was I the one doing it? There weren't a lot of those.
Maybe,
Was it the one that I did?
Ken was in it. Alex
Okay.
Santos.
No, it wasn't.
No, I don't think you were there. That, at least that session. But anyway, I remember like just sitting there and being like, wow, I can't leave this place. This place is home. And just over the years, it just, I just meeting more people, getting closer to more people, forming those relationships, it is so invaluable. Again, I said this before to you guys before we started the call, but it's definitely one of the best things I've ever been a part of. And it's just the family there, and I love it so much. So you should all go.
Alice needs to go.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I've never been to Camp Nejeda, but after hearing you guys talk, I want to do it. Maybe like be a counselor or something.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I saw that Marlene asked a question about exercise and blood sugars, and I definitely wanted to get to that one because I think that's a super important question, a good question. Exercise for me is very weird with what it does for my blood sugars. So if I'm going to exercise, I'm going to be doing something, I usually want to be at least 200 before I start. Otherwise, I'm just going to be way too low. So I'll always eat something beforehand, whether it's just some fruit snacks or something like that. And normally exercise makes me plummet. Most of the time, if I'm doing exercise, even for an hour, I have to stop and eat more sugar throughout me exercising. And there's been a couple of times where if I'm really exercising, and I haven't had this happen since I played tennis in college, because that was the most intense exercise that I've ever done. And I don't think I'll ever get to that point again. But if it's intense enough and crazy enough, my blood sugar would actually be very high at the end of the exercise. I think I can't remember what they call it. It's like a rebound or something like that, where basically sometime in the middle, my blood sugar was dropping so quickly and got so low that my body kind of dumped a bunch of sugar from my liver into my bloodstream, and I just skyrocketed, and I'd be in the high 200s or 300s after exercise sometimes, which was really crazy. And that's a really hard high to come down from. It's hard to give yourself enough insulin after that, after you're exhausted and tired, and you think I shouldn't be giving myself insulin. It's very weird.
Yeah, I think especially when I was learning about what exercise does to blood sugar, during when I was like becoming certified in personal training, there's like two different things that can happen. So your body will either start using a ton of your sugar stores, which will plummet your blood sugar a ton. That's more for like cardio exercise, like running, spin classes always shoot me down. But when I'm lifting, my blood sugar rises because it's like short bursts of intensity. So like in those moments, your body's just like putting out as much energy as it can. So it like raises your blood sugar. So I like to lift, but keep my heart rate up. So balancing that is sometimes super weird, which is why I always have my Dexcom next to me. Just to see like that is the best tool to have. You're just watching your CGM and what you're doing. But I do have to agree with Max that I try to stay around like 180, 200. If that, I could go higher, or at least have. I've also found that if I have a big dinner, like a pasta dinner the night before, and I go and work out in the morning, I don't need to eat anything that morning because I have all of those like sugar stores. But yeah, that's one of the hardest things. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm still trying to figure that out. So yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, before I work out, I usually just eat like a protein bar or something that has protein so that when I get to the gym and I'm working out, it's like leveled. But I actually been to the gym when my blood sugar was low and I didn't have juice. And I was like, oh my, I remember like I just got to the gym. It was like 100, so I hadn't dropped just yet. But I was with my friends and I was like, guys, I need to go back. I can't work out with you tonight. But yeah, you just want to always make sure that you check right before and eat protein. That really helps for me too.
So how often do you say to yourself, like, I got this, I've done this 100 times before, I know exactly what's going to happen when I eat this, and then it doesn't happen?
Too many times.
Every day.
All the time.
All the time.
Yeah.
That must be That's a whole hour in and of itself, probably to handle that. It's got to be really.
Yes.
But so for our guests today, it's 4:55. So just love to wrap it up with one last question. Do you have one key thing, if you were to tell somebody, what's the key thing that you would like to tell guests today? Anything about your diabetes journey, anything about care, anything you think that they need to know that would make their life, that they can take with them and use in their daily lives?
So I think the biggest piece of advice that I could give to somebody, I mean, I think I fully realized this when I was going through my burnout phase in high school, that diabetes isn't necessarily about the carb counting. It's not about the finger pricks. It's not about the pump sites. It's not about any of that. It's feeling low and having to come back from that, and then rebounding high, and then having to come back from that. And it's a lot more of that like mental aspect that makes diabetes what it is, but I think that's what really makes us the people we are, and having that resilience. I mean, that's the best thing I got out of diabetes, probably, is my resilience, just because that lays over to my life. But I don't think I've ever tried to hide my diabetes. I've never been ashamed of it. And I think when people see that you're confident in it, and see that it doesn't matter, like, what you're doing in your life, like, you will always be successful, and you'll always have such solid friendships if like they see that from you, if that makes sense. So yeah.
Yeah, I noticed with when I was going through my burnout, I really tried to like hide from the fact that I wasn't taking care of myself. But I think once you can admit that you're not taking care of yourself, that's when it starts getting easier. Because if you just keep hiding from the fact that you have diabetes, you're never gonna get back to where you want to be. Um, and as long as you have like a good support system with you, and if you don't like try to build your own support system, tell yourself that it's really not as bad as we think it is. If you just take care of yourself, it'll get easier.
I think for me, if there's one thing that I'd want to say, kind of in closing, to like for people to know that are watching and listening, is that like there's so many resources and people who are out there like for you, like for diabetes, that it's crazy and it's so worth taking advantage of. I mean, if you don't know what to do about something, if you're going into a new situation that you've never been into and you want to know how other diabetics have handled it, if you don't know, maybe you're struggling with something with your diabetes and you need help figuring that out, like there are numerous websites and forums. You can just type in like diabetes forum and find anything. Even like Reddit has a whole bunch of diabetes subpages with a whole bunch of questions and answers. You can talk to people, you can interact with people. There's foundations like the Diabetes Foundation that are constantly helping people and reaching out and answering these kinds of questions. There's just so many resources out there that I didn't know about when I was first diagnosed and when I was younger, that I could have taken advantage of. And I take advantage of now. I mean, I was even flying and traveling a lot more now than I ever did before. And I went online and read a whole bunch of accounts of people who have traveled and flied, and I had questions about different things. Do I actually have to take my pump off when I go through those machines? Does anyone actually do that? If you don't, what happens? And all this kind of stuff. And everyone was always very responsive. The community of people who have diabetes were usually all very nice and very willing to help and talk and to other people who have it. So there's people out there, there's resources out there, and there's a lot of them.
Would you guys mind sending us a couple of your go-to places, and we'll send it out to everyone who's on this webinar today? We'll let them know the places where you go.
Sure.
You're right. There's so many questions, random questions like that about when you fly and what do you do and what's like the proper protocol that you would never think of until you're in that situation. A lot of little, but you are all so amazing. I want to thank you so much I can't thank you enough for being here with us today and just sharing your lives with us. And we really, really appreciate it. Your insights are so are just so helpful to, I'm sure, everybody on this call, and as well as people at the foundation, because hearing from you is what we need to know, and hearing what your needs are is what we need to know, because it helps make us better. So you've helped a whole community today in this last hour. We really, really appreciate it. I wanted to announce to everyone on the call today that we will be scheduling, likely scheduling another Voices of Diabetes discussion sometime in the new year. And topics may include diabetes and eating disorders, or talking to friends, and diabetes and relationships. And we just wanted to invite you all on the call today to let us know if there's something in particular that you really would love to hear about or love to chat about. If the Diabetes Foundation does all sorts of events. So if you want to learn more about what we're doing, go to our Facebook page. It's Diabetes Foundation, Inc. You can sign up on our website for our e-blasts. That's dfiinc.org. And to let us know about what you want to hear, just email us at info@diabetesfoundationinc.org. You will always hear from one of us pretty immediately. We love to hear from you. And we're a one of a kind agency, and we're glad that we're able to truly help the public. And if you want to volunteer or get involved in any way, we'd love to hear from you regarding that as well. So I just want to thank you guys again so much for being here, and thank our guests for being a part of today's discussion. We really appreciate it. And I hope you all have a safe and lovely Thanksgiving tomorrow.
You too.
Thank you.
Have a
Thank
good
you.
afternoon. Bye.
Thanks, you too.